41st symposium of Indica. As you all know, Indica is an organization committed for Indic Knowledge Systems, renaissance of Indic culture, Indic traditions, and as part of its preservation, protection, and promotion of Indic culture, traditions, and Indic knowledge systems, which includes textual knowledge, embodied knowledge, experiential knowledge, and material knowledge. That's what actually comprises of Indic knowledge systems. Indica has been organizing several activities, which includes events like conferences and symposiums. In conferences, we send a call for papers. People send their abstracts. Some of the abstracts are selected, and those selected make paper presentations. Most of the conferences after the COVID pandemic are now live. We are organizing them offline. Indica has a unique aspect of Tirthayatra included conferences also. We organized many such Tirthayatra included conferences. And we are have been organizing symposiums later to conferences. We started symposiums later. But the number of symposiums is more than the number of conferences we organize. Because conferences take a longer time to prepare, time to receive the abstracts, select them, all the remaining process takes a long time. But symposiums are being organized every month. Every month we have a symposium. We have other platforms of Indica also, like Indica Moksha, Indica Yoga. So if Indica's main symposium platform is not organizing a symposium in that month, either Indica Moksha or Indica Yoga will be organizing a symposium in that month. For example, next month, we are going to have a symposium on Khandana Khandakadya of Sri Harsha. This is going to be organized by the Indica Moksha platform of Indica. We have been organizing symposiums on several very interesting value-adding topics. See, in symposiums, we don't send for a call for papers. We usually invite scholars. And for the last few symposiums, what we are doing is, we are sending out an invitation along with our own selected invitations, so that people who are interested in coming as speakers volunteer or nominate speakers, so that we don't miss those people who are interested in speaking or who are interested in nominating others. Actually, what happens is, if we don't send out an invite like this and invite the scholars that we know, there is usually this complaint that I would have come. I was interested in coming, I would have come, but I didn't know that you were organizing a symposium. So it is always better to share an invite, so that those who are interested in giving a talk would volunteer, or if any of the uh, audience of that invitation invite, no scholars they can nominate. So that way, uh, we are getting a very good diversity of speakers. For example, we have been organizing a series of talks of late on Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavata on two aspects on each of these. One is living traditions of that text and retellings of that text. Why only Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavata? Because these are the three most popular of the huge number of Itihasa Purana texts that Hinduism has. We have 18 Mahapuranas, almost equal number of Upapuranas. But if you go to common public, they may not say, oh, today I am reciting or watching Matsya Purana or Brahmanda Purana or Linga Purana or Skanda Purana. Any of these other Puranas are not so household texts. They are known to people who put a special effort in knowing. They are known to people who are academicians or scholars or uh, people interested in studying more Itihasa Purana texts of Hinduism. But if you say Ramayana, it is known to all the Hindus of all the educational levels, of all the class levels, cultural levels, all the settlement patterns, to use a technical term, that is in the forest areas, in the village areas, in the cities, in the towns, everywhere. People know Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavata. These texts are known to all. That is why we chose these three texts. And what is academically important about this popularity of these three texts is when academicians get into studying these texts, if they don't realize that they are working academically on popular texts, they are going to land into cultural insensitivities. And that is going to land them into a very big problem of offending the population, huge population, which takes these texts as their household texts. And that blunder is being committed by some of the Indologists who are studying these texts also. They are making all kinds of observations which are completely culturally insensitive. Why should they be culturally sensitive? They would know only when they know the popularity of these texts. They would be careful in their analysis of these texts only when they know that the characters inside these texts are not just some characters inside some book, like in a folk tale or a fairy tale or some other narrative that people hear. These have a strong attachment. People have a strong attachment, a sacred attachment, a sacral attitude towards the characters in these three texts, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavata. And living traditions symposiums, both on Ramayana and Mahabharata, are now completed. We had a living traditions of Ramayana symposium. We had a living traditions of the Mahabharata symposium also. But the retelling symposium shows the popularity of these things. Why, for example, Matsya Mahapurana does not have retellings in tribal areas. There is not a tribal or a forest dweller version of Matsya Mahapurana or a Linga Purana or a Brahmanda Purana or any such thing. But there is a forest dweller version of Ramayana, forest dweller version of Mahabharata, forest dweller version of Bhagavata also. There is a folk version of Ramayana, there is a folk version of Mahabharata and Bhagavata also in all the dialects of folk culture, folklore, in all the dialects of the forest dweller languages. That shows the popularity. Retelling, they are retelling these stories in their own versions. And this retelling may happen in a narrative performing art form or a theatrical performing art form also. And the theatrical retelling or theatrical performance of these texts is most of the times a ritual activity. The participants, the performer and the audience, both they participate in this performance as a ritual. Most of the times there is no difference between the performer and the audience also. They get completely seamlessly merged into one another. The whole performance itself becomes a, a puja. It's a puja for them. It's a worship for them. So in that form, all these stories are being retold in almost every regional language of India, in their dialects, multiple folk dialects, in the different forest languages, forest dweller languages, and their dialects also. Today, we are focusing on the retellings of Mahabharata from that perspective. The original text of Vyasa's Mahabharata, as per the historians of the composition of the text, is older than the date of composition of Ramayana or Bhagavad. They give the oldest date. They give the date of around 8th century BC to the date of composition of Mahabharata. There was a critical edition of Mahabharata that was prepared by Vishnu Suptankarji. For the preparation of the critical edition of Mahabharata, Vishnu Suptankarji collected multiple manuscripts of Mahabharata. And these manuscripts were collected from different parts of India. That also shows the spread of the retellings of Mahabharata or the original text itself. Vyasa's Mahabharata's original text itself had multiple manuscripts preserved all over the country. And the date that is given for the original uh, Mahabharata's composition, 8th century BC, some people consider that there was a small text of this Itihasa, and many portions were added later. But Vishwa Adluri ji and Jaideep Bogchi ji, argue that this idea that there is a lot of thing added into Mahabharata and there are self-contradictions within Mahabharata, all that is uh, a wrong perspective about Mahabharata. Or through their writings, through their talks, through their speeches, they keep establishing repeatedly that it is a consistent text. There is at least the critical edition. At least the critical edition has consistency throughout. There are no self-contradictions. Uh, and in Indian, as an Indian academic word, we have to say there is ekavakyata. Ekavakyata is consistently same understanding throughout the text or group of texts. So there is Ekavakyata at least in the 18 divisions of Mahabharata and all the different chapters within those divisions called Parvas of Mahabharata. And when the retellings in various Indian languages started happening, has also got a history. We are able to see that at least from 5th century AD, there were retellings of Mahabharata in uh, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, in the South Indian languages, and in Odia, Bengali, Gujarati, and other North Indian languages. The Kannada Mahabharata was composed by a Jain, from a Jain perspective. There is a Jain twist to it. But 11th century, in 11th century, Telugu Mahabharata was composed. Mahabharata in Telugu was composed. It was completely obedient to the Vyasa's perspective. How about the dates of forest dweller versions and folk versions of Mahabharata? It's a very difficult topic for research. No one can tell you when the original folk version or tribal version was composed as an oral song. So we can say that the popularity of the story of Mahabharata uh, as a Sanskrit text composed by Vyasa's Mahabharata got a transmission. How it got transmitted into such deep, remote corners like forest areas or the rural areas is a very interesting question. But once it happened, oral versions, uh, folk versions, and forest dweller versions started getting composed. Probably the folk version composition and the forest dweller version composition is probably older than the written versions that we were mentioning, 8th century, 11th century uh, compositions in the written form in a classical language in all these languages like Kannada, Telugu, Odia, Marathi, Bengali, and Gujarati, the classical versions. It was a written text, but probably the folk versions were composed earlier also. But we are able to see their continuity of life of these folk versions in the form of performing arts, in the form of theatrical arts or narrative arts of performance, and all that. And in the process, Mahabharata might have got more creative additions into it. A folk reteller might have added uh, some stories into the original Vyasa's Mahabharata, or might have added some motifs, might have added some characters, might have added some places. For example, the place mentioned in Mahabharata might change into a place known to them, to their own village or to their own forest dweller area or to their own bigger region. They might add a place and say, this incident happened in this area only. That's common all over the world when you have such a sacred attitude towards a particular text, believing that the episode in that text happened in my area, in this area, uh, is a very common thing. So you have places like, Sri Shailam, a Veerashaiva shrine and a very general Hindu shrine also. People say that the Kiratarjuniam happened here. And in Vijayawada, there is a temple of Devi called Kanakadurga temple. That is actually viewed as a Kiratarjunian place where the fight between Arjuna and Shiva happened. And there could be many places all over India where they might be claiming that it happened there. So in the folk retelling, in the forest dweller retelling, they might change those place names also. They might add new characters also. They might omit some episodes, some stories, which they might consider are not very important. For example, in Adi Parva, there is a lot of Vamsha Charitra, the Chandravamsha Charitra of Pandavas and Kauravas has many stories uh, like the Vasu story, Uparichara Vasu Vrittanta, and there is this Vrittanta of Nala Damayanti, Nala Charitra, and there is this very, very important story of uh, Dushyanta and Shakuntala where Bharata is born. Why I am saying that is very important is it is in that portion of Vamsha Charitra that you get a clue to why Pandavas and Kauravas are being addressed as, referred to as Bharatas. Those of you who know Bhagavad Gita might remember that repeatedly Krishna addresses Arjuna as Bharata. This name Bharata for both Pandavas and Kauravas comes from Bharata in their Vamsha. The person after whom the Vamsha is called Vamshakarta. Bharata is a Vamshakarta. There is Kuru, another Vamshakarta. There is Puru, one of the sons of Yayati, who is also a Vamshakarta. Because of Kuru, they got the name Kaurava. Though we actually say Pandava and Kaurava, technically Pandavas are also Kauravas because their lineage is from Kuru. They are Kauravas. And you have Puru, the son of Yayati, after whom the uh, lineage is being called Paurava. They are called Pauravas. Pauravas and Pauravas and Bharatas. All this Vamsha Charitra is there in the Adi Parva, but the folk narrator, folk reteller might not cover these areas. He might directly start with the generation of Pandavas and Kauravas. But interestingly, what happened is even these portions, like the Nala Damayanti Charitra or the Shakuntala Charitra, they got folk versions separately, individually, not as part of Mahabharata retelling, but some of these stories, which are there in the Adi Parva, as part of Vamsha Charitra, they became independent narratives, and there are retellings of those independent narratives. For example, Shakuntala story has folk versions in some parts of North India. And there are the stories of Nala Damayanti, for example, uh, in South India at least, I think even in North India, in many parts, the Nala Damayanti story, Nala and Damayanti together as a couple, Their story is a very popular folk story. There are folk narratives of this Nala Damayanti story. And the Uparichara Vasu story that we get as part of Vamsha Charitra is connected to the Indradvaja rituals. And these Indradvaja rituals are very important. For example, in Madhya Pradesh, there is a frog temple. It was constructed for Indradvaja rituals only. And these Indradvaja rituals are connected to the Vasu Charitra, the Parichara Vasu story of the Adi Parva of Mahabharata. So, as part of that, people narrate that story as a folk version. So, independently, some of these stories have become very important folk versions and forest dweller versions. And within Sanskrit literature itself, different episodes have become independent kavyas. For example, Naishadham or Naishadha Charitram, uh, which is composed by Sri Harsha, is a very proudha kavya. Proudha in the sense erudite kavya, very tough to understand kavya. People use the word Naishadham, Vidvad Aushadham. It is such a tough kavya. But what is it? It is the retelling in a kavya form of the Nala Damayanti story of Mahabharata. People have a belief that when there are marital disputes in a family between husband and wife, Parayana of this story, Nala Damayanti story, will help them spiritually get benefited to get that uh, marital problem resolved. Because of this belief only, even in folk culture, in folklore, people narrate this story so that families live together, uh, marital disputes are resolved, and all that. So Sriharsha composes that as Naishadam, a very hard, scholarly kavya. And you have Drishya kavyas, Shravya kavyas. Shishupala Vadam is an independent kavya. Kiratarjuniyam is an independent kavya. You have Bhasa's plays like Karnabharam and Urubhangam. Today we are going to have talks about both these. Karnabharam, we are going to have a talk. Urubhangam, we are going to have a talk. These are plays, Drishya kavyas, natakams composed by Bhasa in the beginning. He is one of the earliest of uh, drama composers in Sanskrit. So you have Veni Samharam, which is again a Mahabharata based drama. Veni is the uh, hate, uh, what do they call, plate. And Samharam is the binding of the hair into that plate. You know the story that Draupadi decided to leave the hair loose uh, until Bhima brings the blood from the chest of Dushyasana who molested her. So, this story of Bhima finally uh, binding the hair of Draupadi, Veni Samhara, that is a play. So, you have in Sanskrit itself retellings of specific episodes of Mahabharata as different Shravya kavyas and Drushya kavyas also. And in different Indian languages also, specific episodes have been composed into different kavyas, prabandhas, kavyas, very, for example, the same Naishadham has a Telugu version called Shringara, uh, Harsha's Naishadham. And Kalidasa developed the Shakuntala episode into Abhijnana Shakuntala in Sanskrit. And that Abhijnana Shakuntalam of Sanskrit got several different versions, uh, retellings in different Indian languages. Almost every Indian language has Abhijnana Shakuntalam of Kalidasa retold in their own language. Like that, there are specific episodes of Mahabharata getting retellings in various Indian languages, in classical languages, in folk versions also. But retellings of entire Mahabharata in regional classical versions and retellings in folk and uh, tribal versions, all these are going to get focused in today's symposium. Very interestingly, uh, we have a professor from Argentina who is going to talk about Spanish versions of Mahabharata, how Mahabharata got composed in Spanish, in Spanish speaking areas, including Argentina. Uh, he volunteered after watching our invite about the symposium. He himself volunteered. Uh, Namaste, sir. Uh, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it correctly or not. Professor Tanzover, uh,
Perfect,
Gustavo,
doctor.
Gustavo Tanzover, he came forward to speak about the Spanish versions of Mahabharata. And we have Sushumna Kananji, who is going to speak on the Kannada version of Mahabharata by a scholar. It's a classical version composed in Kannada. That scholar who composed the Kannada Mahabharata is also known as Kumara Vyasa. She is going to focus on a specific episode, the Draupadi Vastrapaharana episode. In that, Shushumna Kananji is known for her gender studies, women's studies. So that is the reason why she chose the Draupadi Vastrapaharana episode, so that she can focus on the women perspective, the gender perspective within the Draupadi Vastrapaharana episode of Kannada Mahabharata. And we have Shweta Prakash ji. She is going to focus on Odia Mahabharata. Uh, this is Shweta Prakash ji. She is going to speak on Odia Mahabharata. She is also going to focus on a specific episode within that, particularly a motif creatively added by Sarla Das ji, who composed the Odia Mahabharata. And we have, as always, our Pranshuji, Pranshu Saxena ji, who is going to focus on a forest dweller version, tribal version, hill tribal version of Mahabharata. And we have a great scholar himself. He's a traditional scholar of Shastras and then Shatavadhani in Sanskrit and Telugu. He is going to speak on Telugu Mahabharata. Telugu Mahabharata was composed by three different classical writers. They together they are called Kavitrayam, uh, triad of poets. He is going to speak on how this triad of poets retold Mahabharata in a classical Telugu version in obedience to Vyasa's perspective. They did not change Vyasa's perspective. They were trying to be very obedient in their retelling of Mahabharata. Unlike many other retellings where the authors took some creative liberty, these authors also took some creative liberty, but they balanced between their creative liberty and their obedience to Vyasa's perspective. So Lalita Aditya ji is going to speak on that aspect of Telugu Mahabharata. And we have our Advait Athavale ji, who is going to speak on several Marathi retellings, particularly non-traditional and anti-traditional Marathi retellings, and how the problem with those non-traditional and anti-traditional retellings, Marathi retellings of Mahabharata, is identified and criticized and critiqued by a saint The critique is going to be presented by Advaita Kavleji. We have our own uh, uh, Jain scholar who is going to speak on Jaina version of Mahabharata. uh, Parshva Shah. His name is Parshva Shah, and he's a very well-known international advocate, a lawyer, and he's going to present the aspects of Jaina Mahabharata uh, for us today. And I, apart from this overview talk that I am giving now, in the afternoon, I'm going to give my own talk on a retelling of Bhagavad Gita during the freedom struggle. Uh, During the national movement, freedom struggle, when Indians were fighting against the British, as part of that, a lot of literature emerged. And one of the scholars uh, retold Bhagavad Gita, mixing the freedom struggle language in the retelling of Bhagavad Gita, almost making Arjuna as a freedom fighter and Krishna as a person inspiring Arjuna for freedom fight. Uh, but there is a very clever employment of language that he does, and we are going to see how all that is done in a Telugu retelling during the freedom struggle. Uh, and we have many such very important talks today. All these talks are going to show how there is a balance between the creative liberty that the retailer takes in retailing and the obedience to the traditional version, the original intentions of Vyasa. Actually, there is this theory that translation uh, is also a kind of interpretation. Translation is also a kind of commentary. Uh, so the translator always has this task of balancing between being obedient to the original, the source text that is translating, but he also uh, during the process of translation, unless he is a very poor translator who does almost a literal translation of the story, he might even go for his own creative. When such creative translation is done, it is almost called a transcreation. It is transcreation. When people call such translation as transcreation, what they mean is that the translator is getting a status of an independent poet. For example, the pride of poets in Telugu, they are never called translators. They are called poets only. People call them poets. So is a retelling poet a translator or a poet is a big question. These poets are getting the status of an independent poet, not as a translator, only because they are retelling the original text using all their creative faculties. So they are not translating, they are transcreating. They are creating their own text. For example, in the Telugu Mahabharata, the Parva divisions, the major 18 Parva divisions of Mahabharata are maintained as it is. But the Adhyaya divisions within Parvas, there are Adhyayas. Those divisions are not maintained by the Telugu poets. They uh, just grasp the story of the Parva, immerse in it, start their narration all on their own. They don't do shloka, shloka to padya, word to word kind of translation. They imbibe the whole story in themselves, they digest it, and then they start retelling the whole story in their own way as a poet, independent poet. That is why these people got the status of an independent poet. Sarala Das in Odia, or Kumara Vyasa in Kannada, or for that matter, even Pampa in Kannada, uh, or any other retelling poet in any other Indian language, in the history of literature of those languages, they are being treated as poets, independent poets. They are not being treated as translators. This, for people to understand why, in spite of actually bringing the Sanskrit Mahabharata or Sanskrit Ramayana or Sanskrit Bhagavata or any other Sanskrit text into those regional Indian languages, they are not being treated as translators, but they are being treated as poets independently. You will have to focus on the creativity aspects of these poets. And that creativity uh, is not very special with these classical writers. That you can see in folk versions also. That you can see in the forest dweller versions also. So any today we might not be able to identify the original composer of the folk version, of the forest dweller version, but there probably was a composer, right? In the very beginning of that folk version, there probably was a writer or a group of writers, or it is a collective composition by the entire village or the village groups or something like that. So all those also exhibited their creativity, uh, but that creativity has one person, one author, while talking about myth and how myths are retold, uses the word elasticity. There is an elasticity of the story. When the storyteller retells a story, you cannot, there is an elastic limit of creativity that you can show. If you go beyond a certain limit of that elasticity, uh, the reception of the retelling fades. Audience do not receive that kind of a retelling. Why? Because it's already a popular story, and the audience have an expectation from uh, the storyteller that he is going to tell the story that they already know. Known stories are only being retold by the retailer. Then they have expectations of how a character is characterized in that story, how the message is delivered in the storytelling. If there is any change in that, the audience get completely rebelled. They get repelled and they revolt against the storyteller. They revolt against the reteller, and there is a negative reception or bad reception or rejection of that kind of bad retelling. What is bad retelling? From the point of view of the audience, the reteller is going against the expectations the audience have from the reteller, because they already know the story and they have an attitude for the story. They have expectations of the rasa from the story, the message from the story about the characters and the characterization and all that. So when we are going to have the talks today, we are going to see uh, from all the scholars how these retailers have managed both. For example, Bhasa takes creative liberty in his Karnabharam play about how he retells Karna. In his Urubhangam play, he takes his own creative liberty about how he presents Duryodhana. But contemporary critics, contemporary academic scholars, the mistake they commit is once they see this creative liberty, they think that they are going against, the author is going against the original author Vyasa. They think that Vyasa is revolting against Vyasa in writing Karnabharam Abhubhangam. But our speakers today in our symposium are going to show how that expectation is wrong. We have Ketu Ramachandra Shekharji, who is going to talk about Urubhangam, uh, and he is going to show how Urubhangam being looked at as a revolt against Vyasa is wrong. And uh, people even talked about Urubhangam as a tragedy. Ketu Ramchandra Shekharji is going to tell us how that view of Urubhangam as a tragedy is also wrong. And Karnabharam also, people argue that Bhasa in Karnabharam is presenting Karna uh, in a positive light as a hero, uh, unlike Vyasa, who makes Karna to be on the villain side. Today, uh, we are going to have a talk by Sundareshwaran ji, who is going to tell us how that perspective is wrong and how Bhasa is interpreting the Karna story within Vyasa's perspective, but creatively in a different way, putting his own interpretation of Karna's story. So this balance between obedience to the original and exhibiting one's own creativity that is shown by all the retailers is what we have to watch during the talks of this symposium. If you have any questions or comments, uh, in your screen you see a question and answer box. You may use this question and answer box to type in your question or comment. After the talk, the speakers may take up if there are interesting and sensible questions or comments. They will respond to your questions and comments. Thank you.